Welcome back, everyone. This is Dusk. So it's finally happened. The theory I've been discussing here on this channel, and over on that brat LunaPienArt's channel, about Imu being able to freely possess Gunko's body, has officially come true. The first time this theory, that Gunko has a second consciousness, was introduced was back in January on my other channel. Back then, the idea that Gunko might side with Luffy and the others was still pretty niche. I'll admit, there are times I wish the channel were a bit bigger. But instead of dwelling on that, I've decided to focus on what really matters, creating content that more people can genuinely enjoy. Sure, as the channel grows, I know there'll be more criticism, maybe even hate or threats. But I've got a strong circle around me, and for now, I'm good. By now, many of you probably know about a controversy that's been stirring things up in the Japanese One Piece community. It's about a comedian who claimed that Oda-sensei doesn't like theories. To be honest, I kind of get it. When I was in middle school, I used to post my own stories on online forums and, yeah, having people figure out your plot twists while you're still writing, it's not exactly fun. That's actually why I've personally avoided tackling one of the biggest questions in the series. What is the One Piece? I've got a few ideas in my head, sure, but I haven't decided whether it's really the right thing to share them. I'm still unsure. That said, it's important to note that this current controversy is based on something said by someone who knows Oda-sensei. It's not an official statement. If One Piece's official team or Shueisha ever came out and said, "Please stop doing theories. I'm ready to stop posting theory content immediately." In fact, up until a couple of years ago, I made over 100 One Piece videos on an Italian language channel, but I deleted all of them and chose to start fresh here, taking the risk on this new channel. Right now, I'm 100% focused on refining the content here so that more of you can enjoy the videos, and I plan to keep pushing myself to grow the channel further. And, as I mentioned earlier, I also run another channel called LunaPienArt, where I cover the latest One Piece chapters, other manga series, and a variety of topics. So if the upload pace on Dusk isn't quite enough for you, checking out both channels might give you a more steady stream of content to enjoy. Let's start by talking about what sparked this theory in the first place. I've always had a strong feeling that there's more to Gunko, who's portrayed as being on the world government's side, than meets the eye. Here's why. Ever since Dressrosa, there's been a pattern. Female characters who initially appear to be at odds with Luffy, even temporarily, end up joining his side and playing a crucial role. There's one more thing they all have in common. Each of them, for one reason or another, ends up in tears. So in the Elbaf arc, I started thinking, maybe Gunko is the next woman to follow this cycle. If that's the case, then there has to be a deeper reason behind her role with the God's Knights. That's when I landed on the idea that she might actually be under Imu's control. And eventually, I believe she'll remember everything from her past. And when she does, she'll break down in tears. From there, I came up with 3 main reasons to support this idea. First, that the thing Gunko fears most is Nika. Second, the character she might be modeled after. And third, her strangely asymmetrical eyes. Let me break each of these down in more detail. Somars asks Gunko what she's afraid of, and surprisingly, her answer is Nika. But here's the thing. As confirmed in Road to Laugh Tale, Nika's awakening is the first one in 800 years. If the person in the flashback in chapter 1149 really is Gunko herself, then it's hard to believe she's been alive for 800 years. So it's pretty unlikely that Gunko actually experienced any direct fear from Nika herself. So then, why is Gunko so afraid of Nika? What I started thinking here is this. What if she's being controlled by Imu and she's actually sharing Imu's memories, including the experience of having seen Nika firsthand? Next, I want to highlight something else. The character who may have inspired the creation of Gunko. This comes from a Japanese children's book series called Anpanman. Oda-sensei actually mentioned in an SBS that his idea of justice is basically, I love Anpanman. And I believe he may have taken inspiration from a character in that series named Rolpana-chan. She also has bandages wrapped around her face. What's interesting about Rolpana is that she has two hearts, one good and one evil. She actually has heart symbols on each side of her chest. When she's in her good state, the red heart glows, and when she's in her evil state, the blue heart lights up. Personally, I think this whole dual heart concept, good and evil, is something Gunko shares too. I think it might be because she's sharing her senses, or even her vision, with Imu. Her left eye, in particular, looks eerily similar to the eye design we saw when the 5 elders transformed into their yokai forms. That strange eye might be a result of this sensory link with Imu. In fact, in chapter 1149, right before Gunko is overtaken by Imu, there's a clear emphasis on her left eye, which suggests that, in contrast, her right eye still belongs to her. And to support that idea, there's a moment when she runs toward Brook, and only her right eye is shown in the panel. And here's more evidence. Even though Imu is all the way in Mariajois, super far from Egghead, they were still able to sense Emeth's haki. That shouldn't be possible unless there's some kind of shared perception going on. It's likely that Imu is connected to the 5 elders the same way Gunko might be. Also, it seems like Gunko can share information with Imu instantly, without even needing a Den Mushi. In chapter 1149, we see that Kiringham also seems to react to Imu's voice, so it's probably safe to say that most, if not all, members of the God's Knights have both regeneration abilities and the ability to receive Imu's voice. However, there's something that clearly sets Gunko apart from the rest of them. One major difference is whether or not they age. Gunko seems to have memories from before Brook became a pirate. That would mean she's been alive for at least 52 years, yet her appearance is still that of a young woman. Now, we've already learned that Saturn, one of the 5 elders, looks virtually unchanged from how he appeared 200 years ago, so it's pretty safe to say they're ageless. But in contrast, Garling, the supreme commander of the God's Knights, appears to have aged appropriately since the God Valley incident. It's also been revealed that Shamrock, the captain of the God's Knights, is Shanks's twin brother, and since he looks almost exactly like Shanks, we can assume he's aged naturally and is around 39 years old as well. And since he's at the top of the organization, it's likely the other knights age normally as well. Then there's another key moment in chapter 1140. Gunko is revealed to be able to use the abyss. But what stood out was Shamrock's reaction. He seemed genuinely surprised by the appearance of 2 other God's Knights. That detail felt off. In chapter 1138, it was Shamrock who gave the order to Gunko to call one more. But then, 2 of the God's Knights showed up. When Shamrock noticed something was off and asked, "Why were 2 called?" Killingham responds, "Because you're heading back, Captain." It was an order from higher up. But wait, wasn't Shamrock the one who gave the original order? Now it's suddenly coming from higher up? That shift is suspicious. One possible explanation is Imu. Maybe Imu was watching everything unfold through Gunko's eyes, saw what was happening with Shamrock and Elbaf, and gave Somars and Killingham new orders right on the spot. And there's something else. In fact, in chapter 1149, Imu mentions that they're taking too long to get the job done, so it's safe to assume Imu is the one who ordered them to head to Elbaf. There's more. Even though Gunko has the arrow fruit, she can also summon the abyss, which seems to have nothing to do with arrows at all. In that moment, Kiringham was seen asking someone about the location of the abyss. If all the gods' knights could use the abyss, then he wouldn't need to check the location, he could just warp there himself. So that likely means, as of now, the only ones who've been granted the ability to summon the abyss by Imu are Gunko and the 5 elders. When you look at it this way, Gunko's line in chapter 1142 suddenly makes a lot more sense. Somars asks her, "What are you afraid of?" And she replies, "Nika." Now, I don't think that fear is coming from Gunko herself. It's probably because of Imu's mind control. She's not just under Imu's influence, she's likely inherited Imu's values, thoughts, even memories. Remember when Imu sensed Joy Boy's Haki? They looked genuinely terrified. That fear wasn't just from Haki. It was because Joy Boy had transformed into Nika, and that triggered something deep inside Imu. So if that terrifying memory of Nika is living inside Imu, and Gunko is mentally linked to them, then yeah, it totally checks out that she would fear Nika, too. This brings us to the big question: who exactly is Gunko? And my theory is this: Gunko is actually Mosako, the person Loki was speaking to over the Denden Mushi. In the English version, the name is translated as Shaggy, but in Japanese, it gives off a very different impression. Mosa mosa is actually an onomatopoeia used to describe something thick or bushy, like overgrown grass or a lot of hair. Now, whether the name Mosako comes from that onomatopoeia or if it's just a name by coincidence isn't entirely clear yet. Even official translations have had major errors, like with Garling's title, so it's usually best to refer back to the original Japanese. That said, there's actually someone in the Straw Hat crew who fits the word mosamosa perfectly: Brook. Brook's proud afro makes him a textbook example of a mosamosa afro, a term that's actually used in Japanese to describe that kind of thick, fluffy hairstyle. Maybe that's exactly why she called herself Mosa when speaking to Loki, because Brook's big, fluffy afro left such a strong impression on her. Now, about that Denden Mushi. Some people think it doesn't look like Gunko's because Denden Mushi usually take on the features of the person they're talking to, but this one is a Snow Denden Mushi, a special cold weather variant that's covered in fur for insulation. So the fluffiness has nothing to do with Gunko, it's just the Denden Mushi's winter coat. If you look closely at the eyes, they actually have multiple pupils, and the eyelashes are more detailed. Those little touches seem to reflect Gunko's features after all. So, mind control is a pretty common trope in manga. And usually when a character is under mind control, they don't remember anything that happened while they were being controlled once it wears off. Most of the time, she's under Imu's control, but there seem to be moments when that control fades, like when Imu is asleep or distracted by something like their obsession with Lily. During those gaps, I believe Gunko is thrown into a cell, locked away. Now, remember in chapter 1134, right at the beginning of the call, Loki says, "You've got a lot of free time too, huh?" Loki was literally nailed to the tree of Adam, so of course he had time to kill. But that line also suggests that Mosako was just as idle, which would make perfect sense if Gunko, free from Imu's mind control, had been tossed into a prison cell during that same time. And it lines up perfectly with the end of the Egghead arc. Imu totally lost it after sensing Joy Boy's Haki. The 5 elders' abilities were undone, and they got instantly teleported back to Marijois. So if Imu lost control then, it stands to reason Gunko's mind control would have also snapped, and she'd be thrown in jail to prevent her from acting on her own. And then there's the moment when Loki asks Mosako about a terrifying experience. This latest chapter might actually give us a clue. There's a scene where the woman we believe to be Gunko is crying out, calling for her father in fear and desperation. That's clearly a traumatic experience. After that, she's taken to Mariajoie by the God's Knights, and it's likely that's where she was given a new mind by Imu and began serving as one of the God's Knights. Loki also mentions he's never seen or met Mosako before. He might have recognized Shamrock as looking like Shanks, but with Gunko, he didn't notice anything because she looked and acted like a totally different person. Now, the one weak point in this theory is the voice, but even that might make sense. If you think about Rolpana from Anpanman, her voice changes dramatically between her good and evil modes. And finally, there's this line that really stuck with me. When Mosako tells Loki, "You do have kindness in you," Loki completely flips out, yelling and shouting. Mosako calmly replies, "Please don't raise your voice." I think that line says a lot. If she's back to her true self and locked in a prison cell, having a secret conversation with someone like Loki, who's openly rebelling against the world government, she'd have every reason to stay quiet and not draw attention. She didn't want anyone to hear and realize what was going on. Now here's the big question. How did Mosako and Loki come to know each other? I believe the answer lies in something that happened 14 years ago. There was a major incident at Orist Castle where Harold was reportedly killed by Loki. But I think the God's Knights were also involved in that battle. Why? Because of the strange marks left on the castle ruins. Most people think those scars were caused by Loki's own powers, but I want to throw out another possibility. Shamrock. We learned back in chapter 1138 that Shamrock can completely erase his presence. That ability is similar to what Shanks has, described in Volume 4 Billion as Observation Haki Suppression, also called Kenbun Goroshi. So, if Shamrock was secretly taking part in that battle without Loki noticing, then those deep scars might have been caused by his Cerberus Saber ability, not Loki's. Shamrock was probably working with Harold, trying to bring Elbaf under the control of the world government, but Loki and Yarul were likely opposing that plan. Once Loki ended up killing Harold, the connection with Elbaf was broken, and the entire operation fell apart. Now here's where it gets interesting. Loki might have picked up a Denden Mushi that the God's Knights left behind after the battle. When he called it Gunko, free from mind control and in her original state as Mosako, answered, and the two of them became friends. That would explain a lot. Why Loki says they're friends, even though he's never seen her face or knows her name. While it hasn't been officially confirmed, the woman who appears in the flashback in chapter 1149 is almost certainly Gunko. Some people are speculating that she might be Brook's daughter, but personally, I think that's still up for debate. One reason is the way she refers to him. She says, "Are you Brook?" In Japanese, when someone's talking about their father, they usually don't call him by name. A more natural line would have been something like, "Otou-sama nano?" Of course, this kind of language depends a lot on the specific family dynamic, so it's not a hard rule, but still, it stands out. Plus, if Gunko were Brook's daughter, you'd expect Brook to react with a lot more shock or emotion when seeing her. So, for now, I'd say the idea is interesting, but far from conclusive. But this scene brings one particular phrase to mind. The Rumbar pirates who can make even crying children smile. It makes me think, maybe something happened in Brook's homeland. Some kind of tragedy where many people, like Gunko, were left in tears. That could be the reason Brook and his crew chose that motto, to bring laughter back to a world that had known too much sorrow. So then, what exactly did happen in Brook's kingdom? One possible answer is the God's Knights. In chapter 1146, we learned that Brook is aware of the God's Knights, and not only that, he recognizes them as being above even the celestial dragons. Do you remember Doflamingo, one of the most popular characters in One Piece, saying this line? An assassin from above. That word, above, carries weight. It strongly implies that the gods' knights are seen as higher in rank than even the celestial dragons. Now, it's still unclear just how well known the gods' knights really are in the world of One Piece. Aside from people directly connected to the world government, the only ones who've hinted at their existence are Dragon and Loki. So it begs the question, how did Brook find out about them? Let's talk about Brook, and how the kingdom where he once served as captain of the royal guard might be the key to all of this. In Japanese, his title was Dancho. Now, here's something interesting. So far, only 2 other characters in One Piece have held the title Dancho, Pedro and Shamrock. While the Guardians are one thing, according to Loki, the gods' knights are known as the most noble knight order in the world. So it's very possible that Brook's former guard corps was a similar knightly organization, which would also explain his gentlemanly appearance and refined manners. Even his fighting style, swordplay that resembles fencing, is rooted in European medieval knight culture. And among the Straw Hats, Brook arguably shows the strongest sense of loyalty to Luffy, almost like a knight to his king. Think about it. When he joined the crew, he knelt on one knee and introduced himself with a formal speech, just like a knight being sworn in. There was also the time Momonosuke asked him to perform, and Brook refused, saying he didn't want to take orders from anyone except Luffy-san. Sure, he jokes around with Luffy a lot, but underneath that, it seems he holds a kind of quiet devotion, something closer to knightly loyalty. Let's take a closer look at the scene where Brook mentions the gods' knights. If you look carefully, even though he's a skeleton, it almost looks like there's a crease between his brows, a hint of anger in his expression. And yeah, technically bones can't wrinkle, but the emotion still comes through. That made me wonder, what if the kingdom Brook once served was destroyed by the gods' knights? That would explain why he already knew about a group under the celestial dragons called gods' knights. By the way, I'm guessing Brook got that scar on his forehead during a fight with the gods' knights, while trying to protect Gunko. So then the question is, why did the gods' knights wipe out Brook's kingdom? One possible reason? To build their own reputation. If they were aiming to be known as the most noble knight order in the world, maybe they were going around crushing other knightly forces as a way to prove their dominance, like a twisted game of conquest. It's very possible that Brook and his royal guard actually fought directly against the gods' knights as one knight order against another. But there's something even deeper here, the kingdom itself. I believe Brook's kingdom was connected to the ancient kingdom. And this kingdom, I think, was known for its music. It may have supplied instruments and songs to the ancient kingdom, and maybe even passed down the origins of Binks sake. That famous lyric, "Soon we all become bones anyway," could have been written by someone from Brook's homeland, someone who used skull jokes as part of their cultural identity, which would also explain why the Rumbar Pirates were a musical crew. And most of all, we can't overlook their motto, the Rumbar Pirates, making even crying children smile. That line might reflect a belief passed down from 800 years ago, when people in that kingdom saw Nika as the god of laughter. Even Brook's old captain, Yorkie, seems to be named after the Japanese word yoki, meaning cheerful or lighthearted. That too may be a nod to the values of a kingdom that once believed in the power of laughter, and in Nika himself. There might also be a reason Brook seemed to know so much about Wano Kuni. Geographically, Wano Kuni is located to the west of Reverse Mountain, on the same side as the West Blue, separated only by the Calm Belt. So it's possible that Brook's kingdom once had trade relations with Wano back in the days when both were allies of the ancient kingdom. And here's where things get really interesting. In the lyrics of Binks no Sake, there's a line that goes, A song of birds drawing circles in the sky. Sound familiar? It should. It immediately calls to mind the crest of the Kozuki clan, which also features a bird in a circular design. All of this suggests that Brook's homeland may have had deep historical ties to the ancient kingdom, and that's why it became a target of the God's Knight's purges. And Brook? He's always been someone who carries out critical missions like they're nothing, often shocking even the Straw Hats with how casually he handles high-stakes moments. Think about it. When he cut down Jorah without hesitation. When he stole the poneglyph rubbing right from Big Mom's castle. When he shattered Carmel's photo during the wedding chaos. And yes, when he boldly asked Big Mom if he could see her panties. At some point, completely out of the blue, Brook is going to drop a major truth about his homeland, something connected to the ancient kingdom, the God's Knights, or both. And when he does, it'll blow the crew's minds. By the way, the Rumbar pirates were wiped out 52 years ago, and based on what Brook says, that was right around the time Roger was starting to make a name for himself as a rookie. Roger would have been 25 years old then. It makes you wonder, maybe that was a period when the God's Knights were actively carrying out purges across the world. And maybe, after seeing what was happening, Roger decided it was finally time to set sail. After all, this was his pitch to Rayleigh. How about we turn the world upside down together? So if Brook ever gets the chance to talk with Gabon in the future, we might actually get some new information about what was going on during that time, when Roger was still just a rising rookie. Also, Brook once said that the Rumbar pirates were wiped out by a terrifyingly strong rival. What if that pirate was one we already know? Rox D. Zebek. We still don't know Rox's full background or age, but we do know that the Rox pirates were tearing through the seas about 40 years ago. So if you do the math, it's not a stretch to think that 52 years ago, Rox may have been active as the captain of a different pirate crew and crossed paths with the Rumbar pirates during that era. It would fit the timeline,